Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love Seville show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We are live in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, in the country, on the I Love Seville network. We're presented by Skooma Boutique Dispensary in the Charlottesville Downtown Mall, located next to Rapture. Skooma Boutique Dispensary has certificates of analyses for everything in the store. David T. and his team, guys, have stuff for anxiety, sleeping through the night, pain management, relaxation. Check out Skooma Boutique Dispensary on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. We'll give some props to Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine for being a part of today's show as well. Dr. Wagner, changing people's back, and Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. A lot to cover on today's program, guys. I don't know if you watched the city council meeting last night, but dude, this meeting was chaos. Bickering and arguing, backroom dealing and wheeling, threats of blackmail made. The mayor legitimately at the end of the meeting tried to make a push to amend the city charter. She legitimately made a push to strip the city manager of hiring and firing autonomy. City manager is able to hire and fire. Our form of government allows that. She wanted to remove this responsibility and this power away from the city manager and put it in the hands of council. It's no secret that the mayor has about 6 weeks left on council, and she's doing everything in her power to leave her mark on this city and do it a complete 180 with local government. I'll get into the nitty-gritty today on the program. We'll talk Albemarle County bus drivers. We're going to have two of them on the show on Thursday. Bob Warren and Earl Smith, bus drivers in Albemarle County. The bus drivers are making a push to unionize. We have students arriving at schools in Albemarle over 1 hour late. That legitimately means they're starting their school curriculum an hour later than the students that were dropped off by their parents in a vehicle. I want you to think about that. Not only is there a bus driver shortage, but there are also bus drivers who are calling in sick. And now, bus driver leadership is making a push to unionize. Two of them on the show Thursday in a program that will be one of the best ones we've ever done, with the content undoubtedly picked up by the local news cycle. Here was an interesting tidbit that Superintendent Matt Haas released yesterday. If you're a student in Albemarle County and you miss 10 consecutive days of school, you lose your spot on an Albemarle County bus. They're assigned seats. I'll repeat that statistic again. If you miss 10 consecutive days on a bus, 10 consecutive days of school in Albemarle County will strip your seat away from your kid, and he or she will no longer be allowed to ride the bus to school again. What do you think that's going to cause, the cause and effect? If you're a mom and a dad and you rely on a school bus to get your kid to and from school, and your kid gets COVID, and your kid has to quarantine for 2 weeks, which is the letter of the law, as a mom and a dad, are you going to weigh the scales of justice and say, good God, if I keep my kid at home for 2 weeks in quarantining, that's 10 days plus, and my kid loses his spot on the bus? 10 consecutive days, you lose your spot on the bus. Does that mean moms and dads and kids that rely on school bus transportation now have to ask themselves, do I sneak my kid into schools because I cannot risk them losing a spot on this yellow bus? Because I have to work and I can't drive them to school or pick them up afterwards. Good Lord, we'll talk about that today on the program. Folks, Java's closing at the end of the month. The Venerable Coffee Shop on the Downtown Mall, over 12 years of proudly serving the community. The owners are retiring and a new storefront, potentially empty, on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. So much to cover on today's program. Alex Erpy will join us in studio, Emergent Financial Services CEO. The lead of the show undoubtedly has to be a city council meeting that is absolutely a soap opera of tremendous proportions. The meeting yesterday was over 7 hours. Over 7 hours long. The meeting yesterday included allegations of blackmail. I'll get to that. The meeting yesterday included in-house, in-council fighting and bickering. I will get to that. The meeting yesterday included a Spanish Inquisition by the mayor of the city manager, an interrogation that you would see on The Sopranos or The Wire, and not a city council meeting. I will get to that. The meeting yesterday included the mayor trying to amend and alter the city charter in the bottom of the ninth inning of a 7-hour meeting in a surprise capacity. I'll repeat. You know what? Why don't I start with that? The mayor in this town, in a weak mayor type of government, I'm gonna give you the flip book of how Charlottesville government is run. Here we go. There's 5 people on city council. Mayor Walker, Councilor Snook, Councilor Payne, Councilor McGill, and Councilor Hill. These 5 people are essentially the board of directors that manage the CEO of the city, which is City Manager Chip Boyles. City Manager Chip Boyles runs the city. He runs the city. He hires and fires, and he's the day-to-day decision maker for operations and where the city is going to go. The 5 people on council manage the city manager. The 5 people on council can hire the city manager and they can fire the city manager. Now let's talk about what the mayor can do. This is called a weak mayor form of government in Charlottesville City. And the mayor, for all intensive purposes, is a figurehead. The mayor is able to set the agenda. The mayor, for council meetings, the mayor is able to call the meeting to order. The mayor is able to determine when a speaker should be cut off when they've surpassed their 3 minutes of public speaking opportunity during a meeting. Besides those handful of things, the mayor is a figurehead type of position that has very little different power than a traditional city councilor. Last night, I watched a city council meeting that was The Young and the Restless meets As the World Turns. Over the course of this meeting, and to start the meeting, the mayor at the beginning tried to amend the agenda and include the following topics: discussion on the firing of Chief Brackney, discussion on the hiring of a new police chief, and the discussion of the removal of Bellamy Brown, chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board. She tried to push those 3 topics into the agenda last night. She got no support from council members on discussing the firing of Chief Brackney. She got no support from council members on discussing removing Bellamy Brown from the Police Civilian Review Board. She did get support from her fellow councilors on discussing the hiring of a new police chief. Because she got support from her fellow councilors on the hiring of a new police chief, that amendment was added to last night's agenda. What I don't understand, and perhaps what the mayor does not understand, is she sets the agenda. So she does not need to utilize, at the start of meetings, different amendments. She does not need to utilize, at the start of meetings, a vote to change the agenda. She can set the agenda from the beginning. First thing that I'd like to bring to her attention. Next thing, in last night's meeting, we had activist attorney Jeffrey Fogel make blackmail allegations, essentially saying, activist attorney Jeffrey Fogel, that the PBA had dirt that it utilized to get Brackney pink-slipped and Mooney in an interim position. That is strictly hearsay, gossip, and rumor mill. Not factual, not news, not reality. Gossip, hearsay, and rumor mill. We also, in yesterday's council meeting, watched Nikiah Walker bombard the city manager, Chip Boyles, with Spanish Inquisition-like questions. Questions that would leave anyone, just hang tight right there, Alex, if you could, thank you. Questions that would leave anyone uneasy, uncertain, and asking what the hell is going on. Why these questions were done in a public forum that the entire community could watch instead of in private session befuddles me, confuses me, flabbergasts me, makes me scratch my head and realize, what are you doing? Furthermore, at the end of a 7-hour meeting, the mayor made a push to try to amend the city charter. A push that needed the city attorney of Charlottesville to get on the call and offer legal advice and guidance to the mayor about amending the city charter. Lisa, the city attorney, and Nikiah, the mayor of Charlottesville, were going back and forth, bickering and arguing in a public setting with thousands of people watching. The mayor interrupting the city attorney having to talk through the mayor just to finish her thoughts. The mayor has 6 weeks left on the dais. She's chosen not to run for re-election. And it's crystal clear in these 6 weeks that she is trying to absolutely change this form of government. She is trying to strip the city manager of the power he has to hire and fire people. She is B, trying to impact and influence the hiring of a new police chief immediately because she knows if she doesn't do it in the next 6 weeks, she will not be part of the process. She is C, trying to remove Bellamy Brown from the Police Civilian Review Board because Mr. Brown utilized, in her eyes, his platform to support the police and what the police says was faulty leadership by Brackney. Yesterday's city council meeting was a microcosm of dysfunction, a microcosm of disturbing behavior, a microcosm of me first instead of city first, Yesterday's city council meeting was, in a nutshell, a soap opera that was humiliating to watch, yet a humiliation that we couldn't take our eyes off. It's like when you're on Interstate 64 and you see an accident, and you drive by this accident and you rubberneck. You don't know what you're going to see. You're scared about what you're going to see. You're worried about what you're going to see. But you slow down from 75 to 35, causing a logjam of traffic because you can't help but looking. 6 weeks left of her tenure, and she's trying to amend the city charter in a Dillon Rule state. And I learned last night from Lisa Robertson, the city attorney, that council does indeed have the autonomy to amend the charter and strip the city manager of the ability to hire and fire people in City Hall. I genuinely felt bad for Mr. Chip Boyles last night. How the mayor treated this man and tried to back him into a corner and browbeat him with an interrogation in front of the entire community was, in a nutshell, demeaning. I genuinely felt bad about the brand that is Charlottesville right now. A brand perceived and portrayed by leadership of one of bickering, arguing, fighting, divisive, and downright disturbing behavior. I genuinely felt bad for Mr. Bellamy Brown, a volunteer who is getting unpaid, that is literally being thrown under the bus by Nakia Walker. I would encourage anyone after this show, if you have the time, to watch the last 30 minutes of last night's council meeting, where you will see one person trying to amend a charter that is the governing documents that determine how the city is run and managed. And this person did it in the bottom of the ninth inning of a 7-hour meeting when she has less than 6 weeks left on the dais. I see why there is attrition in open positions in downtown Charlottesville City Hall. 2 or 3 other items left before we get to Antonio Banderas, a.k.a. Alex Erpy, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. This is extremely concerning from Albemarle County's school system. We predicted this on this show a month plus ago. There are such little bus drivers in Albemarle County that students who ride these yellow tin cans are arriving to school 1 hour plus later than their peers. If a mom and dad can drop off their kid, they get to school on time and prepared to learn. If a mom and dad has to work and is unable to drop their kid off at school, that young man or that young lady is arriving to school over an hour late. You talk about a delta between the haves and have-nots. We often highlight that delta with private school education and public school education. Well, that delta now has infiltrated public school systems. Your mom and dad can drop you off at school. You get there early. You're in no rush. You're there for the first period, ready to learn. Your mom and dad have to work and can't drop you off at school. You show up an hour late. You sprint into the hallway. You have to get a late pass from the principal's office. You're missing first period, and you're sitting down in a chair with your friends looking at you. Where the hell you been, Johnny? What happened to you today, Susie? And you're uncertain about the curriculum for that given day. We have 2 drivers set for the show on Thursday. Bob Warren, an institution with Albemarle County school system and its bus drivers, and Earl Smith, a Scottsville stakeholder and a school bus driver. Both these drivers on set to talk about the unionization of bus drivers in Albemarle County. The unionization of bus drivers in Albemarle County because they are treated unfairly from a payment standpoint, from a respect standpoint, from a medical benefit standpoint, and from a COVID management standpoint. And you want another damning quality or another damning fact, another damning statistic, another damning item of concern that should be stuck in your craw? Yesterday, Superintendent Matt Haas of Albemarle County Public Schools, he released this tidbit of information. If your son or daughter misses 10 consecutive days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 consecutive days of school, your son or daughter has their bus seat stripped from them. They will no longer be allowed to ride the bus. So if you're a mom and a dad and you rely on yellow tin cans to take your kid to and from school, and your son or daughter gets exposed or worse, stricken with COVID, and you realize an exposure or a COVID or getting COVID is going to require 10 plus days of quarantine, you are left with this scales of justice question. A, do I keep my kid at home and do the right thing? Or B, scales of justice. Do I tell my son or daughter not to mention anything about the exposure or the fact that he or she has quarantine because mom and dad can't drive them to school? They have to ride the yellow tin can. Think about the predicament and the position mommies and daddies will be in if their kid is exposed to COVID or worse, gets COVID. They have to ask themselves, do I send my kid to school? Because if I don't, I risk them losing a seat on a yellow tin can, and we know my employer will not allow me to drive my son or daughter to and from school. Boys and girls, viewers and listeners, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, I Love Seville, Snapchat, TikTok. Folks, this is a bad spot. And if you're a bus driver and you're trying to unionize, wouldn't you utilize this little tidbit from Superintendent Matt Haas and say, you're forcing kids to get on buses that may have been exposed to a pandemic or worse, have the COVID, because the moms and dads are afraid their seat will be removed out from under their tushies. Ay, mi madre. Carajo. I'm just downright concerned of the leadership. Thank you, Carol Thorpe. Carol Thorpe brings this to my attention. Very well done, Carol Thorpe. Mayor Walker remains the mayor until the end of the year. The voting happens in early November in about 6 weeks, but the mayor remains on the dais till the end of the year. So between now and the end of the year, the mayor has shown us that she's trying to amend the city charter and strip the city manager of his hiring and firing rights, and she's trying to fast track the hiring of a police chief so she can influence the decision making. The interim police chief, Mooney, has 6 months tops of life on the job before a new person must be hired. if I am Lloyd Snook, Heather Hill, Cedar McGill, and Michael Payne, and everyone that watches this program realizes I have aspirations to I am running for Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. I'm asking for your support to vote me into office in 2023. If I am in a position of leadership, and I hope to be in this community, if I'm Snook, Payne, McGill, and Hill, you stretch that 6-month window with Mooney as the chief, the interim chief, as long as possible. And you get the hire to happen early next year when there's a brand new council with fresh perspective that hasn't been corrupted, influenced, jaded, irritated, irked, or downright close-minded in their hiring perspective. What did you think of the meeting last night, Carol? I'm curious of your perspective, CT. A lot of comments coming in. Lisa Costello says 14 days of quarantine. So folks, you have to quarantine from the COVID for 14 days if you're exposed or you contract COVID. But if you are not in school for 10 consecutive days, your seat on the bus is eradicated and stripped from you. Don't you think that's going to cause moms and dads to determine or weigh the scales of justice? Do I send my kid to school because I can't risk losing his or her seat on the bus? And how many will say, you know what, Johnny and Susie, go to school and keep your mouth shut? And when that happens, what's that do with this pandemic? With hallways, in schools, in buildings that have poor ventilation, they're not cleaned properly, with kids not properly social distancing, with masks not worn the right way, with hundreds of little kids and middle schoolers and high schools walking in the hallways shoulder to shoulder, with some Johnnies and some Susies exposed or worse with the COVID because you can't risk a spot on the bus and losing it. Ay, mi madre. This is no bueno, chico. Let's get Judah Wickhauer, our friend, Alex Erpy on set. We'll spend about 20 minutes chatting with the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, the Antonio Banderas of the finance world. And then I'll get to your comments and your questions. Nicholas Erpy, our buddy, says, wow, no words for this level of dysfunctionality. Amen. CMO Nicholas Erpy, Emergent Financial Services. This is my buddy, Alex Erpy, right here. We'll get to your comments and concerns here in a matter of moments. Anything you want to talk about what we just covered here, Alex Erpy?
It's funny, we talked about dysfunction last week a little bit, just how the number one issue is when there's so much uncertainty, and that's part of the issue, is you have trouble as a business owner or even as an individual making decisions when you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't even know what the process is going to look like. Because, I mean, I did not watch City Council meeting last night. I'm kind of glad after your description that I didn't, because it would have been far too stressful to watch. But you sit there and say, if you're going to change the form of government in Charlottesville from a city manager form to I'm guessing City Council would make hiring and firing decisions?
City Council, what she's proposing, would have much more say and influence over hiring and firing in this municipality.
I mean, if you're going to change the entire form of governance, that makes you have and especially in such a short time to attempt it, that creates a lot of uncertainty. Because a lot of people are going to say, I don't know what the end result's going to look like if we're trying to do this in 6 months.
Did you ride the school bus?
I did not. My dad would drop us off.
The fabulous closer, Xavier?
Mm-hmm. Yep, for the first 5 years, and then we actually did a homeschool program.
Very nice.
K-1-2 program. The one actually was started by, it's an online program. They were big on charter school in California. And so it was a charter school and online program from 6 on.
Moms and dads that are watching the program, what would you do if you had this decision to make? Send your kid to school exposed with COVID or worse, having COVID, because you know if you don't make this decision of sending your kid to school, your seat on the bus is stripped away from your kid if they miss 10 straight days of school.
What's inexplicable is that I'm pretty sure CDC guideline is 10 days from onset of symptoms. At least that's what I've heard from a reputable source that I know. Well, that is 10. You would think that you would just simply make it, if you really were to be pushing this, just make it 12 days. You'd think someone in leadership would say, wait a second, 10, isn't that the same number of days as recommended quarantine for the CDC? Like, it just takes someone to ask the question.
Right?
Someone to just say, wait a second, 10 sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah.
I think I've read it on the CDC website. So you sit there and say, it's such a simple change. You put it to 12.
I got the spouse of a teacher in Albemarle County Schools sending me a message. I'm not going to utilize their name to protect their privacy. I will relay this message to you verbatim. We got the Daily Progress, NBC 29, and CBS 19 on the feed here. Okay? You did an interview earlier today with NBC 29. I'll get to that interview. This is a story for you, NBC 29, CBS 19, and the Daily Progress. I want to see this in your news cycles ASAP. Here's the comment that's come in from the spouse of a teacher at Albemarle County Schools. Jerry, Albemarle County School System is having a closed-door meeting this week about extending teacher hours because of school bus driver shortages. Please do not utilize my name, but I need to put this on your radar. The expectation is teachers will have to work longer and harder because the transportation infrastructure is not in place to get the kids to school on time.
Public school system is now seeing getting a little taste of what a lot of small business owners have had to go through over the past 6 months, trying to operate at same efficiency with the inability to find people to work.
Neil Williamson, Free Enterprise Forum, watching the program, shared a link from the Free Enterprise Forum. He would be a fantastic guest for Today y Mañana. He shares a story about Charlottesville needs stronger voters. Neil Williamson, I have a question for you with the Free Enterprise Forum. I would love to relay your perspective on screen. Yesterday, the mayor of Charlottesville, in the bottom of the ninth inning, at the end of a 7-hour meeting, pulled a fast one on city council, on the city attorney and the city manager, looking to amend the city charter and strip hiring and firing responsibility and autonomy away from Chip Boyles. Neil Williamson, what do you make of that topic? Any answer, anywhere you want to go, I'll relay that perspective on air. Alex Erpy, we're going to talk finance on this program. I promise you we will.
Absolutely.
But this topic is certainly very hot right now.
And it impacts finance in
Let's
many
go.
ways. I mean, a small business owner, you're trying to make decisions based on the environment that you have around you. And one of those is a regulatory environment. As a small business, you like to know what regulatory environment you're going to see in 2020. If you think about it, a lot of small business owners, I know my firm, very soon, and including right now, we're thinking about 2022 already. By September, October, you need to be thinking about next year. A small business doesn't hit January 1st and say, now it's time for me to think about 2022. You do it early. And so you're looking ahead and saying, what's my regulatory environment going to be next year? And you sit there and say, I have no idea, because I have no idea what's going on, either at the city or the county level, especially if you're in the city. You say, I have no idea what my environment's going to look like. I have no idea what the decision makers are going to be. I have no idea what power those decision makers will have. Is the decision maker going to be a city manager, or is he not going to be a city manager? Who will that person be? So you sit there and say, now I can't make decisions for 2022. So what do? I hold back. I'm not going to make investments. I'm going to think twice before making hiring decisions, because I have no idea what 2022 is going to look like. And there's already enough uncertainty out there just from the economic environment without throwing in regulatory uncertainty. But you see it on the major, when you have the publicly traded markets, they do not like regulatory uncertainty at the federal level. But sometimes we forget that it works the same way on a local level. Local business, just speaking for myself as a small business owner, local business does not like local uncertainty. It's very difficult to know how you're supposed to grow your business and what you're to do the next year.
Alex Erpy dropping knowledge bombs on the program. Neil Williamson has got a comment for us. Luckily for the city of Charlottesville, you have to count to 3 to make anything happen on council. And yes, I rode the bus to school. So at the end of a 7+ hour meeting, at the open agenda period at the end of the meeting, when everyone is exhausted.
Yeah, 7 hours.
7 hours. And a lot of that 7 hours was bickering and arguing and complaining and the type of interaction that does not recharge you. At the end of a 7-hour meeting, the mayor tries to pull a fast times at Richmond High, and get the city attorney caught off guard, the city manager caught off guard, and council caught off guard, and say, I want to amend the city charter, I want to strip Chip Boyles of his hiring and firing rights, and I want that autonomy and that responsibility to fall on the shoulders of city council. When she made that move, I looked, Carol was watching, I watched you, Carol, you have great comments, Carol Thorpe. I was looking at the faces on Zoom of the councilors, and they were bewildered. They were flabbergasted. They were taken aback, initially unsure how to respond. They remained silent. When it came to a vote, after Walker made a motion to amend the charter, the motion failed 4-1. None of the others on the dais said, let's make this happen.
Which is not surprising.
Not surprising. My friend, you're a smart man, a brilliant man, intelligent man. If you're running a business, thinking about running a business, an aspiring or current entrepreneur, you've touched on this already, and you hear this stuff happen, what trickles through the medulla oblongata?
Oh, that's pretty good. I haven't heard that in a long time. It's bringing me back to, like, what is that, biology class?
Yes, sir.
Right there. I mean, what triggers do is, for me, instantly you go to, all right, who am I going to be dealing with if I'm in the city, who am I going to be dealing with if I have to now deal with regulatory or tax issues? Because typically, you've got a chain of command. If your chain of command is city manager, people he hires, policy is made through that chain, you know one set of facts. If suddenly the facts change, you say, well, city manager is no longer in chain of command. Chain of command is city council. I now have to watch every city council meeting to figure out who's going to be hired in all the departments that I might have to work with as a small business owner approaching City Hall for anything that I may need to approach them with. And we know, you and I both know, there can be a number of things that you would have to approach with. I mean, they come to you every year for the business personal property tax, right? So you just sit there and say, who am I dealing with now? Am I still going to be dealing with a chain of command from this direction, or am I going to be dealing with a totally different chain of command? And then even from a customer base, you see that if you're relying on people, on a growth of your customer base in charge, you have to think, how attractive is Charlottesville now?
I mean, I would think this drives tailwinds behind Nelson County, tailwinds behind Louisa County, tailwinds and momentum behind Orange County, behind Waynesboro, behind Gordonsville, municipalities and jurisdictions that are way pro-business and don't have this level of young and the restless.
They may even be silent. There's a point where silence looks better than dysfunction. Hearing nothing sounds better than hearing uncertainty, and now you don't know where to go.
One of the things Brian Pinkston said on this set, Brian Pinkston's running for Charlottesville City Council. Brian Pinkston said this, Alex: I want to be the city councilor that no one knows his name.
That's an interesting.
What do you make of that?
That's probably a better perspective.
He doesn't want to be in the news. He doesn't want to cause drama. I don't want people to know my name. I just want to go about doing my job.
Right, and it makes it. To be honest, that makes a lot of sense. Again, if sooner or later, like we all know, your city council, your name is out there, right? But I think the challenge that we're having right now is that very deep personal arguments are happening publicly. It would be nice. So one of the things, I mean, when I sit on some boards, typically
A handful of boards.
You don't. There are certain things, particularly new agenda, right? New agenda items. You don't bring them up for the first time in public settings. You wouldn't have a fundraising event and say, now that I've got all these people watching, let's change. I'd like to get this new board member on. I'd like to change this policy. Particularly something major, you sit together, you do a strategic plan for it. You're thinking 3 to 5 years. You have a smaller committee that begins to discuss the way that will be set up. You then go to the larger board. You talk it over. You're doing this in private, right? If it's recorded, it's for your own benefit to rewatch later, right? And then at some point when you have a decision that appears unanimous, right, even if it wasn't, that appears unanimous, you then go forth and present it to the public. That's typically how it works, at least in the nonprofit space. And you could argue that a local government is the biggest nonprofit of all in this area. So you would like to see just a little bit more of that. Not everything has to be public, I feel. I feel that we're in an age of social media where we feel like everything has to be public. If I'm going to talk to you, I need to do so publicly. But in many ways, important things can be done in private, and some things probably have to be done in private because you want people to feel empowered to share their opinions.
Exactly.
My suspicion is those other 4 city council members.
Why would they open their mouth?
They're not going to share any actual opinion on this topic
Of merit
in a public setting, having just been presented with it, because you've had no time to think about
to process. 100% agree. Alex Ruppy dropping knowledge bombs here. May I ask the board you sit on?
Oh, so I sit on Community Investment Collaborative,
CIC.
Charlottesville Scholarship Program, beautiful program, providing scholarships to lower income kids within Charlottesville, usually CHS students, to go to 2- and 4-year institutions, as well as some adults, which some people don't know. If you work for the city, you can get, if you want to get a certificate or training in something, Charlottesville Scholarship Program, you can do for that. Obviously, Forward Adelante, I sit on the board of, as well as I'm the treasurer for Minority Business Alliance of the Charlottesville Chamber of Commerce. So a good number of boards.
This guy's a mover and shaker, a well-connected and networked individual. You did an interview with NBC 29 earlier today. I was driving by. I saw Alex Ruppy in front of the camera talk to the folks over there at my old stomping grounds. I'm like, my boy's doing an interview. They're like, we love him. We love him. He's well-spoken. He shows up on time. He has a lot of things to offer. Tell us about the interview.
So basically what just happened is that you may have noticed in the news just this past Friday, Minority Business Alliance, we've presented the John F. Bell Senior Vanguard Award to the Community Investment Collaborative and the staff there, and just the great work, in honor of the great work that they did over the past year. That award, for those who don't know, it is given to someone who's made an organization or an individual who has made significant contributions for the minority business community here in Charlottesville. And last year, just being on the in and seeing the work that the staff at CIC did, you're talking $800,000 worth of COVID loans, recovery loans, over 800 grants of CARES Act funding totaling $12 million if delivered, they basically administered these grants for places, Charlottesville, Albemarle, as far as Culpeper, doing grants. And you just see all these small businesses, a lot of them minority businesses that needed recovery, and CIC was there working with them each one. It's just a huge impact that they had last year. So NBC 29 was gracious. Riley over there was very gracious, wanted to interview
Riley
me.
Wyant?
Riley Wyant from there wanted to interview me just to talk about the award and the presenting and the great work that CIC did last year, just the mission of MBA, which is promoting minority businesses and people who support them here in Charlottesville.
My friend, what is the temperature on the street? I ask you this question all the time. What is the mood on Main Street, the temperature on Main Street, heading into the final quarter of this year? We got Delta spiking. Mm-hmm. We just outlined how moms and dads are going to have to weigh the scales of justice about sending their kids to school and risk having their seat stripped from them on the school bus, or having them stay at home and quarantine if they're exposed or get COVID. We got a lot of things going on, dude.
There is definitely a lot of headwinds, unfortunately, I think here in the fall a little bit that we're seeing. I think it will impact people's decisions. My hope is that there's still enough tailwinds behind us coming out. I mean, as much as there's uncertainty now, I think we should all say there was far more at this point last year. So you're at least seeing that tailwind of, okay, I have a little more idea with Delta and with this what to expect. I know, I've seen this movie, unfortunately, before. I know what this looks like. Rather than saying, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what this looks like. I have no idea what actions I may take. So I think you definitely have some headwinds there. I was sad to see another business on downtown mall, Java.
Yeah, I didn't even get to that. Why don't I give the nitty-gritty here?
That's more of a retirement.
That is a retirement. Shoot, I didn't even get to that, and that was on the rundown on the right side of the screen. Java is closing after 12 months. In fact, Alex Herpy, I'll read you the retirement statement and then get your take on this. I've posted this on the I Love CVille Instagram. I would encourage everyone to follow I Love CVille on Instagram. Third largest following in Charlottesville, behind the city of Charlottesville and UVA. Dear Java customers, after 12 wonderful years of serving the Charlottesville community, we are moving to a different chapter of our lives and retiring. Java will be closing at the end of September. We thank each and every one of you for all the years of kindness and support. Best wishes, the husband and wife owners of the coffee shop.
I'll miss it. I had some good meetings. It was a great place to go in and have meetings, especially in those little nooks and corners that they had there in the back. But just another business that we will miss. So I mean, you definitely, and it's kind of sad because we would like to encourage new businesses to step into that downtown mall place. Now that there are so many that have either gone out of business or retired, that all of them went out of business for COVID reasons. But you'd like to encourage new ones to step in, but I'm not really seeing too much of that. I've seen some movement, one side of the street to another, moving down, but not a lot of brand new, oh yeah, I really want to be on the downtown mall and go for it there.
September, historically a choppy, and that's saying it at best, month for markets. September of 2021, absolutely no difference. Yesterday, we saw all the indexes red and bleeding across the board. I mean, at one point, the Dow was down 900 plus yesterday, a sizable drop. Are we attributing this to traditional September headaches and heartaches, or is this an indicator that a larger correction is on the horizon in Q4?
So I wouldn't put it as a larger correction that I'm seeing at this point. I think this is, September, of course, is that strange anomaly month where people are already on edge. Yesterday, you can't discount that the Evergrande news finally hit. So Evergrande is a company in China. It's a Chinese
real estate company.
And their interest payments on their debt, their bonds, are due, I think, Thursday. Some were due today, most of them due Thursday. And basically, they are not going to pay. They are bankrupt, essentially. And there are many concerns as to whether the Chinese government will bail them out or let them fall apart, because this is entirely in the hands at this point of the Chinese government. And so the market had ignored it for a long while. I think the market started to get a little queasy. Part of what happens with the stock market is that when you're at what are basically all-time highs, I mean, it's funny, my dad made this point to me today. He said, if you think about it, are we even down 5% yet in the month of September? We may not even be down that much yet, and we're already panicking like there's going to be a correction. And I think that's part of the psychology when you're at all-time highs, that every little blip, every little piece of bad news gets you worried that, oh, is this it? Is this the correction? Is this the 10% that sooner or later is going to happen? And we have not yet seen that, and I can't say for certain that's whether or not that's going to happen, because it's hard to know these things in advance. But it is interesting how we panic sometimes as investors, even though we haven't yet reached what is actually panic territory. 10% corrections happen very frequently, and they usually rebound. You don't hit a bear market until you're at minus 20. So you have 10%, and we're not even talking about a 10% correction yet. And Wall Street is in complete panic mode. And so our philosophy is always, these are opportunities, right? When these things happen, to just either stay in the market, if you're not in it, to make sure you're in the market, that you're not missing out on potential gains. September is an anomaly. But if you believe that, right? If you sit there and say, well, there's nothing that's happening in September that really justifies, because for our understanding right now, there are no U.S. banks that have massive exposure to Evergrande, because there's a currency issue there. They weren't dealing in U.S. dollars for the most part. There may be U.S. companies that own their bonds. We don't know whether or not that's going to be the case. I think the market's a little bit on edge to see what Powell says tomorrow and whether they're going to begin tapering the Federal Reserve.
You're talking about the Fed's two-day policy meeting.
Two-day policy meeting. So the markets are looking at tomorrow. My suspicion is that this is a very convenient reason why the Fed will decide not to taper. It's just our suspicion at Emergent Financial Services. But we'll see what happens. The market is just, this is that waiting phase. Uncertainty, like we talked about, the market does not know what's going to happen tomorrow, and the market does not know what's going to happen on Thursday when Evergrande basically cannot pay its interest. And because the market doesn't know, the market pulled back big time yesterday. Again, if you are sitting there, you have to, with all this investment, you kind of have to judge what you really think, what you really believe deep inside. Because if you sit there and say, I do not believe that this is an actual economic problem that is going to impact the bottom lines of companies, then you have to sit and say, I have to ride this out. And I have to use this as an opportunity to reinvest. Because you can't let market sentiment and psychology drive you to make decisions that aren't based in logic.
So you're saying get that dry powder on the market.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're saying.
If you believe that this is an anomaly, and that this is, that Evergrande is, and for us, we're thinking right now that this is just market panic for us. So our philosophy is you adjust your percentages, and we talked a little bit about how we have adjusted China, just from the perspective of how do you, as an investment advisor, justify being invested in Chinese companies when you don't have third-party audits of their financials.
He's talking about essentially minimizing Chinese positions in client portfolios. Mm-hmm. That's what you're talking.
Exactly. Because and that's even more from a due diligence than even an investment, because it could be that Chinese stocks take off and do well. But if a regulator comes to you and says, what's your justification for this position, this Chinese company?
You can't say anything.
You can't say, well, it's their financials, because the regulator would say, well, who audited these financials? And he said, the Chinese Communist Party. And it's a conflict of interest. So you can make adjustments like that. What I'm getting at is you can make adjustments like that while not removing yourself from the market. You don't have to say, oh, I'm worried, I'm panicked, September could be actually bad, it might not be an anomaly, I'm going to pull out everything from the market. You don't have to go that far. You just make adjustments. You change your percentages a little bit and say, all right, this looks a little iffy right now, these cyclical stocks, maybe I'll just drop the percentage, increase my percentage in defensive stocks, things that I think will fare well. Even if this does turn out to be a 10% correction this way, I'm in good shape, rather than foregoing the market entirely.
Xavier Erpy's got a comment.
Oh, what does he have for us?
He's holding us accountable. He says there's no transparency from China, so we know nothing about Evergrande.
Oh, he's exactly right.
Last question on the Fed and this two-day policy meeting. And I also want you to include in this answer, if you could, concerns about gridlock in Washington on debt ceiling negotiations. Mm-hmm. We have China's largest developer in Evergrande potentially about to default on everything.
Pretty much. I mean, they're effectively bankrupt.
They're effectively bankrupt. We got Beijing's response to its financial woes. We have gridlock in Washington on debt ceiling negotiations. We have Powell and the Federal Reserve in a two-day policy meeting that's literally going on now.
Right now.
Literally going on now. These factors colliding at the exact same time. And the speculation is that's why we're seeing red yesterday of the largest proportions since May of this year. Mm-hmm. Now, they've rebounded somewhat today.
A little bit today.
Anywhere you want to go on this?
So I think a couple things. So with debt ceiling, I mean, we have seen this movie before. There's always, whoever's not in power says, I don't want to raise the debt ceiling. Whoever has the majority says, please raise the debt ceiling. My suspicion is they will raise the debt ceiling. They always do, even if it takes a 3 a.m. session. But it always panics the market when it's about to happen. Will the U.S. default on its debt? All of that. You get the threats that we might be downgraded, but it always ends up happening. Maybe one day in the future it will not, but my suspicion is it will happen again this time.
Will we have a shutdown? Will the government? We saw that,
That's a good question. We did see that in, I think the big one was 2013 when there was an adamant refusal for days not to do it. If we do, it will not be long-lived. The government is very clever. When they do shutdowns, you'll always notice their shutdowns impact things that don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
That don't cost a lot of money, but we see them. So they'll close all the national parks, and you sit there and say, is the national parks the biggest part of the federal budget? Because I notice a lot of stuff is still running, but the national parks get they'll move all the barricades in. I'm like, didn't that cost money?
Right.
To move the barricades in?
But they make sure they get their paychecks.
Exactly. So the government very clever. When there's a shutdown, they're like, look how painful this is for you. Don't you want us to be back open? And then everyone says, yes, please get back open. So my suspicion is that's what will happen again. Agencies are clever, right? Bureaucracies are very clever. We know how to push the buttons.
So you say get the dry powder off the sidelines. Mm-hmm. You say Q4 is still reason to be bullish. And you say for those that want to stay 100% invested.
Oh, you always want to be in the market. You don't want to miss out on potential gains because you decided to go all in cash. And part of the issue we're having, right, let's be real here, is that and this tells a little bit to the Federal Reserve, is that you can no longer make good income, right, purely on fixed income. Bonds,
cash is trash.
Cash is not doing anything.
Cash is trash.
Trash is trash.
Yeah.
It's like I said last time, it's the reverse tooth fairy.
Yeah. I love that analogy.
Powell comes in, takes money from under your pillow.
He's basically saying if you have cash in your account, you're losing money.
You pretty much are. Over the long term, inflation is eating. I mean, especially this year's inflation. Think about it. If inflation was 5% this year, let's say it ends up being 5%, just throwing a number out there for ease of computation, right? And you had $100 at the beginning of the year, you left it in cash, your purchasing power at the end of the year is $95. You lost. You still have $100 there, but it's only worth $95 in terms of what you can go out and buy now because of inflation. You've lost $5 by sitting in cash. And the challenge we're having is that bonds, what used to be a way to sort of manage that cash and beat inflation, is not there anymore. So a lot of people are looking at the stock market and they're saying, that is my income return. I need that to go up. My dad made this point, Xavier made this point earlier today, just to us in the office, we were having one of our meetings. He said, if you think about it, if you're relying on a 5% stock market increase to fund your retirement, then this is a big deal. Because you can't afford for it to go down 3%. That means now you got to make 7 the rest of the year to get that 5. So that's part of the challenge that we're having. So if you're, granted, we have a very income-based philosophy, but if you're out there and you're sitting mostly in the stock market, there's not many options out there to try to earn and generate return that is not the stock market. So you got to be in the market, but you got to be smart as to how you allocate it. That's where I think the real decisions are made. The real decisions that are going to make or break you is not, do I sit in cash or do I sit in the stock market? It's, how do I choose to allocate my investments in the stock market, and can I generate income that's in the form of cash that I can use to reinvest? Because you don't want to be 100% in, if you think about a company that doesn't pay, like a Plug Power, that doesn't pay any dividends.
Dividends, right.
Right, so you have a dividend in this company does, let's say you lose 10%. This is a great time to reinvest. With what? You were 100% invested, you have no dividends, Plug Power declined, where do I get more money from? So you need to have some part of your portfolio that's generating some kind of dividends and interest. This way, when that 5-10% correction comes, and people always say reinvest, well, there's your dry powder. You were getting dividends and interest earlier in the year. You now put it to work again. So that tends to be our philosophy looking at this, because interest rates are really low, so you've got to generate some income and then just make sure you're in the market, you're not foregoing potential gains, you're not panicking.
This guy's amazing. Emergent Financial Services, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, the firm. If you want to grow or build your retirement, you have questions on your financials, or you want to start creating some generational wealth, Alex, Xavier, Nicholas, Michael, and the beautiful Mrs. Erpe. What is her first name?
Jan.
Jan. I love you too, Jan. And though I have not met you, Jan, I love you too. You have your children are representatives of you, and they're good stock.
Thank you.
My friend,
that.
In person.
A pleasure as always. I liked in person. It's so much fun.
I like in person as well. Oh, Today y Mañana on Thursday.
Today y Mañana. We have some great guests for Today y Mañana on Thursday. So the first one, we're going to have actually the He's the executive director of Anthology Senior Living.
Okay, very nice.
Which is, it's going to be opening soon. So it's like a new senior living community here in Charlottesville. So learn a little bit about that. And we're also really pumped for the pastor of Mission here in Charlottesville. And he is going to be talking about there's actually a changing behavior and thoughts in Cuba exhibition, I think this coming Saturday. And so it's an art exhibition. And he's going to be doing some talks on it. So he's going to talk a little bit with us about the artwork that's on display. It's a Williamsburg artist that has drawn paintings, made paintings of just new thoughts and things coming out of Cuba. So very close to our Cuban hearts, our Cuban roots here. So we're going to have both of them on. So it's going to be a really fun show on Thursday on Today Mañana.
Thursday, 10:15 a.m., Today y Mañana, presented by Emergent Financial Services. Forward Adelante.
Oh, and so Emergent Financial Services, Tristel Noel State Farm Agency, Vitae Spirits, GBS Financial Services, and Forward Adelante.
That's right, Alex Urphy.
Nice.
We give him the round of applause right here.
Thank
we
you.
will see you Thursday morning.
See you Thursday morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
We'll get to comments here, guys, in a matter of moments. Anything you want to say, anything you want to add, put them in the feed, and I will relay them on air. Alex, heck of a job, my friend. Thursday's show is going to be an impactful show. On Thursday at 12:30 on the I Love Seville Network, we have 2 Albemarle County school bus drivers in person, on their lunch break, in between driving students to and from school. Bob Warren and Earl Smith. See you, Alex. Have a good one. Bob Warren and Earl Smith, Thursday, 12:30, I Love Seville Network. Albemarle County's school bus drivers, as we speak right now, unionizing, and they will utilize the power of collective bargaining to go toe-to-toe with the municipality that is Albemarle County government. This is unreported news that after Thursday's show will undoubtedly be in the news cycle. 2 leaders leading that unionization collective bargaining charge aquí mismo on the I Love Seville Network to discuss how the collective bargaining, if it goes their way, will drive tangible value for what is an unrespected career path of school bus driving. I'm going to ask you a question. Why do we not respect the men and women who have the lives of our most precious commodities, our children, literally in the palms of their hands? Why do we not champion and cherish school bus drivers, teachers, and EMTs? Who is the first on the scene when someone has a heart attack, in a car crash, has their life on the edge? EMTs. Who is training the malleable and moldable minds of the next generation? Teachers. Who drives the next generation to and from school in yellow tin cans with no seatbelts? School bus drivers. Why are school bus drivers, teachers, and EMTs not championed, cherished, and compensated? That's alliteration at its finest, baby. Why are they not cherished, compensated, and championed at much more prolific levels? Thursday, we will analyze and take a deep dive on collective bargaining and the unionization of bus drivers in Albemarle County.